Hello, tiny friends. Welcome back to Tiny Keyhole Minis. Before I actually move on to today's featured project, I'm going to talk a little bit about these Waverly craft products. Now, I have Waverly Antique Wax, which I will be using today on the Chrysnbon sewing machine and showing you how I make that look like real wood. I also have Waverly Clear Wax, and then I have some of their basic chalk paint colors. So I have ink, truffle, and elephant, which is the black, brown, and gray. They also have a whole line of assorted colors and different shades. I also have some Dollar Tree foam board, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how these products can make this foam board look like real wood. So you can make faux wood with the Dollar Tree foam board. I'm going to be putting a link in the description box below to the channel that I learned this technique from, which is called the Peppermint Cactus. And I'm going to show you some samples, and I'm also going to show you what else I have learned from her channel. So I love her channel. I love her work. She is a DIY crafter, and I have used these products for so long being a DIY crafter myself, so it is a very popular product amongst those crafters. But here you can see how the foam board looks actually like real wood. It's essential to use one of these sponges to get this technique down. And you can get these from the Dollar Tree as well. I've already pulled little bits and pieces off that I use in my miniatures, but normally you would just cut them right in half for this technique. But this is a must-have tool in order to get the look of these grains. You can see how realistic this foam board looks. It's got knot holes, it's got worm holes, it's got different tones of colors, different grain textures, and all of this was created with the antique wax, the chalk paint, and the sponge. So the peppermint cactus, go to her channel, subscribe to her channel, learn some new stuff, and you can incorporate it into your minis like I do. What I've learned using this technique is that you can mix the clear wax with any one of the chalk paints and get the same technique that you get from the antique wax. Now, I'm not really sure on the ratio or if there is actually a ratio because I eyeball everything. If you don't put enough of the wax in, you'll get more of the chalk paint uh, texture after it dries, which is more like a matte, chalky feel. The antique wax or the waxes, they do have a little bit of a wax coating after they dry, and they do dry a little bit differently, which I'll talk about a little later during the sewing machine. But these pieces are absolutely beautiful. Look at the different tones in the wood colors. I absolutely love, love, love these pieces. She creates wood planks and cuts them down. And then she takes all of her scrapped cuts and pieces and creates miniature ornaments with them. So I have a stash of little bits and pieces of this that I have made the planks and then just cut them down for the purpose of my minis. But look at how realistic they look. This is an amazing technique. And now she's using new tools to create new grain techniques and designs, which are awesome. She has several different tutorials on different colors of the faux wood. So if you're interested in this technique and learning how to do that, just click on the link in the description box below. Here is one of the minis that I learned from her. And again, she makes these into ornaments, but tiny friends, in our world, these are 1/12 scale miniatures, and I adore them. This is a little rustic Christmas crate, and you can fill your Christmas crate with anything you want, anything you can imagine. It doesn't have to be a Christmas crate, but look how cute these are. They're so adorable. I love them. They're super lightweight, and most of the stuff inside came from the Dollar Tree. And then I've just brushed the trees and pine cones with some chalk paint to frost them. I went out in the backyard and I got some twigs and sticks and cut them down for logs. I have a little pieces of scrap fabrics. I have some of their holiday floral from the Dollar Tree, and you can just put whatever you want in them. They're just so cute. I love them so much. She uses hot glue for these, and I've learned so much since I've made these, so I could probably definitely upgrade these and use a lot less glue. But I love these, and I hope these inspire you, and I hope you go on over to her channel and adore it as much as I do. So this is one of the minis. Now she doesn't do minis all the time, but every now and then she throws in some minis. And I just fell in love with these minis. I'm going to show you two more of the minis that I learned from her channel. So this is a fireplace that she did. And again, it's super lightweight because it's foam board. So if you're making these pieces, because they are perfect for any miniature scene, any miniature diorama, room box, anything like that, you might want to glue them into place because they do tend to tip over easily. This one's quite dusty. It's been sitting on my shelf for a long time. I made these quite a long time ago. But how adorable are these? And you can dress your fireplace any way you want. And you can add whatever details you want to these. These are just the basic structures. Super, super cute. And here is a rustic hutch that I have several ideas for. But look how adorable this rustic hutch is. You can add any type of miniatures to these. You can make this look like a hall tree. You can add real hardware to it. You can make it look like an old rustic door and then turn it into a hall tree. You can turn it into a garden hutch for outside. I just love these pieces. You can add little flower pots. Oops. See how lightweight they are? So you would definitely have to glue them into place, but they are adorable. And she makes these with the scrap pieces of her faux wood. They're super quick, super easy little miniatures that you can make for any of your scenes, and then you can dress them any way you would like. So I will leave the links in the description box below to these little miniatures and to the peppermint cactus so that you can learn how to make some faux wood if you would like to learn that technique. Um, Now, before I move on, real quick, I just want to say that I have made some updates and adjustments to my channel, and also I will not be renewing my website. So my website is no more. I just had a super hard time trying to keep up with it. I was not good at updating it. I'm very busy outside of my YouTube channel, so I can really only maintain one or two social platforms. I may revisit my website later on in the future when my life outside of minis isn't so busy. And I do have an Etsy shop. I did decide to keep my Etsy shop. So you can find me at TinyKeyHoleMinis on Etsy if you'd like to purchase any of my miniatures that I have up in my store. I have not updated it in a while since starting my channel, so I will be updating that with new miniatures that I have made along the way, or miniature treasures that I have found. They're not all handmade. I do have a couple of these listed. I believe there's a couple left, and I also have collectibles that I find as well. And there is some of my DIY crafts as well. My email is still the same. I'll try to remember to list that in the description box under every video. And with all that said, we can now move on to the featured project of the sewing machine. Okay, so continuing on with the Chrysnbon kit, I am now doing the sewing machine part. I'm going to speed this up a little bit, and I'm going to begin with the metal pieces of the kit. So I'm using my testers, silver chrome paint, and a little sponge dauber, and I'm just going to begin with daubing that paint, and I have removed this little sponge, just to let you know, is pretty dry. I have removed almost all of it off as much as I could because I don't want a lot of paint to seep on this. I want this metal plate to look like it's the black color of it is wearing off down to its natural metal color and just aging it up as much as I can. So I'm going and doing the same thing with this brush just to get in there a little bit more. And I'm just working it mostly right around the edges where that paint would begin to wear away a lot faster. I'm also using my Folk Art metallic antique gold for the sewing machine wheel. And I'm going back in with the silver. I'm going to do this to all of the parts that will create the stand. I'm not really thinking much about it when it comes to the silver. I'm just dabbing it around very lightly. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on it, and I'm not using a lot of paint at all. Again, this little sponge is almost dry, but you can see how it's beginning to look. Using the sponge technique leaves a great texture to make this plastic look a little more like metal. So I'm just going to do this to all of the parts. And I know I'm speeding this up, but I will slow it down a little more when it comes to the wood grain. This is just basic stuff that really isn't all that interesting. So, just dabbing it around randomly, tiny friends, not really thinking much about it when it comes to silver. So this will be the first coat that I add to the metal parts. With this little piece, I'm going to treat it like I did with the machine plate, with the metal plate. Just going to do it around the edges. I don't really want a lot of that middle part covered up. I do have an idea for that, but I'm just lightly dabbing it on with the sponge. Very little pressure, very little paint. But now I'm going to take these two colors and combine them to make a rust looking color. So it is the Folk Art Metallic Antique Copper and the Folk Art Canal Cinnamon that I normally use, that I'll be showing a little bit later. They actually made a great looking rust color, and now I am just applying it, just randomly selecting some areas where two metal pieces would connect together and adding a little bit of rust. Now, this really brings it to another level. It really gives it uh, a little bit of that look, like it's okay. Now that natural metal color is starting to rust down just slightly. You can see what that looks like. Putting this part together was the most challenging part of the kit. The first four pieces of the stand have to be assembled and glued all together at the same time. So after looking at the instructions, I knew that was going to be a bit challenging. But when putting these kits together, you just take your time. And if you're using the Tester's modeling glue, it really gives you enough time to put these pieces into place and adjust them. And as it starts to dry, they slowly stiffen up. So you're still able to shift them around and put them into place. So that Tester's modeling glue is really superb for these kits. So it's the only glue that I use when I'm putting these kits together for that specific purpose. But you can see what this piece looks like. This piece right here was definitely the hardest part of the kit. I can see losing patience with this, but you just really have to put on your patience pants when putting these kits together. And really just take your time. There's really no rush with these. So moving on to the wood part, I am going to slow this down a little bit because I will be using the antique wax, and it does take a little more effort to do this part. You can see these pieces already have a wood grain. I detached this one piece just to show you how easy and quick they sand. You don't need a lot of pressure and you don't need a lot of sanding. These parts sand very well, but I was just sanding off the notches that the piece was attached to. It really is best just to leave these pieces on when painting them. I'm going to use a really soft brush for the antique wax, and I'm going to begin with light strokes, and you can apply this in a light layer, you can apply it in a little bit of a thicker layer, but I'm going to do both to try and show you the difference. But you really want to try and feather out your brush strokes and try and get it as even looking and as smooth as possible, and I'm doing that by just feathering the brush across the piece. So very light strokes, very lightly brushing along this piece and trying to feather out those stroke marks. Sometimes they'll leave behind a nice little design and you might want to leave those there. But for the most part, you kind of want to try and just feather those out. The antique wax will start to settle in into those little grooves of the grains that are in the plastic, and that's what's leaving behind that darker tone, giving it a more realistic look. It will also do the same thing around the edges, and I'll show you that as well. So don't forget to do your edges as well. That's important. But you can see what this looks like with the lighter, thinner layer. And I'm going to go in on this and do a thicker layer, and I'm going to leave behind some of the brush strokes to show you the difference. It just adds more detail to the design of the grain or the wood. I'm only doing these 3 pieces on this frame because that piece that I'm holding is actually facing the opposite side, so I'm going to have to set them aside to dry a little bit before coming back. I'm going over these with a little bit more just to darken up that layer. I'm barely touching the plastic when I'm trying to feather this out and smooth those brush strokes. So I'm going to set this aside. As this begins to dry, it'll start to thicken up a little bit, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I go on to the next step after applying the wax. This is that cinnamon cannel. I never know how to say that word, but if you can find this, definitely pick it up because this is the perfect base coat or undertone for the antique wax, and you can see it's the same color as the plastic, so I don't really have to use that. But if you're making miniatures with paper products or mat board like I did, or even wood, if you're using real wood like I did with the antique table from the Dollar Tree transformation, you definitely might want to think about adding that color as an undertone or a base coat because it just brings that beautiful tone underneath this antique wax. It's just a perfect duo together. So that is the folk art cinnamon cannel. I do like using real wood stain for some of my projects, but I mostly turn to the antique wax because it does the same thing. It really does. But it's non-toxic. It's not sticky like wood stain. It's not as messy. It acts just like acrylic paint. It dries really fast. It washes off your hands super easy like acrylic paint. So I just choose to use this before the wood stain. See how the darker tones have settled on the edge there? I love that detail. So I'm going to go back in later on and enhance that detail a little more when I do a little more detailing after this stuff dries, and I'll show you that later on. But I leave it if it starts to settle there, if I like the way it looks. If you like the way it looks on your piece, leave it for added design or detail. So I'm just going to go in and go ahead and finish up these pieces. I'm in a groove at this point, so I'm going to move along a little bit faster. When you're looking at your parts, if you're doing one of these kits, you definitely want to figure out which side is going to be your facing outside, what sides are going to be your inner parts that you're really not going to see. One of these pieces had grain, wood grain on both sides, so it was hard to tell if that does happen in one of your kits. And there are little circles on the corners. Those little circles will tell you those pieces go on the inside and not on the outside. So I'm moving along with thicker layers at this point because now, like I said, I'm just in my groove of things. So I'm going in, but I'm doing the same thing. I'm just feathering out those strokes. As this stuff begins to dry, it does dry in a thicker consistency. It starts to get it starts to thicken up some. So it does dry a little bit differently than acrylic paint or the chalk paints by Waverly. Um, but this is what they're looking like. And now I'm going to take a Q-tip and I'm just lightly wiping away some of the excess. This piece has been sitting for a little bit and it's begun to get thicker. So it's starting to dry. So I'm just going in, I'm not wiping it all away. I'm just going in with a few strokes and wiping some of that away, and I'm leaving some of that behind for added detail. So same thing with this piece. I'm just going in. You want to give it a little bit of time to begin to start setting and drying before you do this part, and you want to go very lightly, like with the brush strokes. So you don't want to do this part right away or you'll just wipe it all off. So give it a few minutes to start to set in. Once it starts to dry, it really starts to stick. Okay, so going back to the metal, I am speeding things up again. This is what the pieces are looking like. Now that these parts are nice and dry, I can go ahead and finish putting the stand together. And I'm just giving you a look. I have done both sides on all the pieces, almost all the pieces that I knew both sides were going to be showing. So this is what it's looking like. It's not fully dry, and you can see I'm able to just move it around a little bit and adjust it. You want to make sure your parts are nice and straight. I'm just going to set this aside and let it dry. Okay, these pieces are dry, and I'm going to go in and add some aging with my black chalk pastels. I do like to age with watered down acrylics or with acrylic and alcohol. I love using the acrylic and alcohol on metal pieces because it sticks and dries really quickly, and I learned that from Little Gretchen's workshop. But on these specific pieces, or if I'm doing a mat board kit or I'm working on mat board, um, I like to use the pastels because it it just works differently. Um, and I don't have to worry if I'm working with a mat board or a type of wood or something. I don't have to worry about the watered down acrylic ruining the piece or warping it. The chalk pastels work beautifully for aging. You can really blend them out and soften them up. So I really prefer to use my chalk pastels, whereas the watered down acrylics will just pool and sit, and then when they dry, it looks like a puddle or you can see like a stain kind of thing. So it is good for some uses, but when I'm trying to make a really nice miniature piece, I tend to go with my pastels. When I was in art school, I was really afraid to go super dark on my contrast, and my instructor was like, just let go, bring it to the blackest black. And so over the years, I began to do that, and I learned to just not be so afraid and just bring it dramatic, bring it to the blackest black, and really bring that contrast out. And it does make such a difference. It's like the magic to the detail. So you can see I'm just adding it in where the two pieces or any of the parts and pieces separate or lay on top of each other, right in the cracks and crevices where that black would normally settle in age. And for this piece, I'm focusing on the edges, and as I'm blending it out, it's just kind of brushing a little bit on the face, but I'm more so doing it around the edges on this part. I will go back in and enhance some of that blackness around the edges. I love when wood starts to age and it gets that burnt black edge look around it. I love that detail. So I'm going to try and simulate that a little bit. But this is what they're beginning to look like. You can see how they're beginning to look like real wood. I'm going in to enhance some of that dark black edge, burnt edge around the wood pieces. And I just love this part. This part is my favorite part. All this detailing and aging. This is what really brings your piece to another level. So, okay, so something happened, tiny friends. I have a little bit of glue on this one side, and I love the way it looks. The chalk pastel got stuck in there. So look what I did. I ran with it and I got carried away. A lot of this will be covered up by the cover board, so you won't see so much of it, but see what happens. Something will accidentally happen and it can be a happy mistake, and then I tend to sometimes run with it and then I overdo it, but it gets toned down a little bit towards the end, tiny friends. Okay, this piece is put together. I'm just squeezing it a little tight just to make sure that all these parts and pieces stick nice together. A time for the sewing machine. Voila, that is done. And now I'm placing the cover board right over this section so you can see how that toned down a lot. I'm going to go in and just do some touching up and some detailing. I forgot a whole complete side, an edge to that board, so I'm going in to do that and adding the stand. You can see that's where I forgot the edge. So I've glued it onto its stand. I did all the touch-ups. This is what it's looking like. I added a little silver bead that I had that was actually broken in half to the end of the wheel for added detail. I'm going to go in and add the knobs and some thread and a little bit more detailing. I've got these tiny little pieces that I have collected from Bentley House mini kits, and this is why I don't throw anything away. These are perfect little bolts, or I'm actually going to be using a lot of these for my push button light switches throughout the house, but I'm going to add a couple of these to the holes in the plate, the metal plate from the sewing machine. So I've painted two of them gold, and I'm just going to glue them right into place for added detail. Plate underneath the needle came from leftover parts from when I created the fiddle that just happened to work and fit perfectly well. So now for the knobs. I purchased these knobs off of Temu for $1 a piece, so they weren't a very good deal, but they are antique and I don't have to do anything to them. I do have to make the holes a little bit bigger so they can fit in, so I did that with my hand drill, and now I'm just dry fitting them. I'm taking the drill and I'm just wiggling it around just to make that hole a little bit bigger so they can fit in a little nicer. I'm using my Aleene's jewelry and metal glue to place these in, and I thought they worked out really nicely. I wasn't quite sure, but they did work out very, very nicely. So this is what those look like. And then I found these two little bead spacers, so I'm going to add those to the little drawer in the front. And those sit in really nicely right into those little grooves. So I'm just placing those in. Again, I'm using my Aleene's jewelry and metal glue. Just going to straighten them up a little bit. And this is what that is. Oh, I also found this little metal piece for a logo plate. So I thought that worked out really well. I also added some of that metallic antique gold to the sewing machine body just to give it a little more aging and interest. This is it for today's project, tiny friends. I hope you enjoyed this video today. I hope this helps if you're using the antique wax. You can see what it really looks like up close. I absolutely love how this turned out. I want to thank you all for joining me. Thank you all for watching, and thank you to all my subscribers. Please don't forget to hit that top bell notification button. When I come back, I think I am going to be creating some accessories. I do have a few more bigger pieces that I will be creating to go inside the room, but I think I'm going to switch gears a little bit and create some accessories that will be displayed on some of these pieces and in the room. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Go check out the peppermint cactus. Click on that link in the description box below, especially for those minis because they are adorable. Um, until next time, tiny friends, you all have a lovely day, and I will see you all on the mini side. Bye-bye.